Ever wondered what people ate thousands of years ago? Ready to be grossed out and fascinated at the same time. Number 9. Dormice dipped in honey. Could you imagine eating a mouse for dinner? Ancient Romans certain they could. The upper-class Romans didn't just eat any mice, though. They specifically bred dormice in special containers called gleraria for the sole purpose of eating them. These weren't your average street mice. Dormice were fattened up on walnuts, chestnuts, and acorns to make them plump and tasty. The preparation was quite elaborate. After catching and killing the dormouse, Roman cooks would gut it, stuff it with pork, mince, and herbs, and then either roast or bake it. For an extra touch of luxury, they'd often cover it in honey. Apicius, the famous Roman cookbook author, recommended serving dormice rolled in honey and poppy seeds. This wasn't just a random snack. Dormice were considered such a delicacy that the Romans even had specific laws about when they could be eaten. During certain periods, sumptuary laws restricted the serving of dormice at public feasts because they were seen as too extravagant. Can you imagine laws being passed about when you're allowed to eat mice? The wealthy would serve dormice as a status symbol at their lavish dinner parties called convivial. Guests would recline on couches while slaves presented them with these honey-covered rodents. Archaeological excavations at Pompeii have uncovered cooking pots designed specifically for preparing dormice, showing just how common this practice was. Number 8. Garum, the fermented fish sauce that smelled like death. Have you ever smelled something so foul you couldn't get near it? Ancient Romans had a condiment so pungent that its production was actually banned from city centers. Garum was essentially liquefied fish guts, left to ferment in the hot Mediterranean sun for months. The Romans put this stuff on everything to make garum, fish intestines, blood, and other parts that normally would be discarded were mixed with salt and left to decompose in large open vats. The intense summer heat would speed up the fermentation process, creating a potent brew that reeked to high heaven. The stench was so overpowering that garum factories had to be built far from residential areas, the ancient equivalent of zoning laws for smelly industries. Despite its offensive odor, garum was the ketchup of the ancient world. It was used in practically every Roman dish, from roasted meats to vegetable stews. The Romans even had different grades of garum, with the highest quality, garum socorum, commanding prices comparable to today's finest caviar or truffles. Garum wasn't just a Roman invention. Evidence suggests similar fermented fish sauces were used across the ancient Mediterranean. Archaeologists have found garum factories from Portugal to the Black Sea, with enormous production facilities in Spain that exported the sauce throughout the Roman Empire. Some modern condiments like Southeast Asian fish sauce, Italian colatura delicacy, and even Worcestershire sauce are distant relatives of this ancient flavor enhancer. Number 7. Flamingo tongues and peacock brains. Would you eat a bird's tongue as a snack? In ancient Rome, flamingo tongues were considered one of the ultimate luxury foods. These tiny morsels were typically served as appetizers at extravagant banquets hosted by the super-rich. Emperor Elagabalus was said to have served hundreds of flamingo tongues at a single meal, simply to show he could afford such extravagance. The preparation was relatively simple. The tongues would be removed from the birds and typically fried or boiled with spices. What made them special wasn't their taste, which historical accounts suggest was rather ordinary, but their rarity and the difficulty in obtaining. Each bird provided only a tiny amount of edible tongue, meaning dozens or even hundreds of flamingos would be killed just for a small platter of this delicacy. Peacocks weren't safe either. Their brains were considered another rare treat, often served still in the head of the bird, which would be presented with its colorful feathers reattached after cooking to create a dramatic presentation. Imagine being at a dinner party where a fully feathered peacock is brought out, only for the host to scoop out its brains and offer them to you as a special treat. Roman writer Petronius satirized these excesses in his work Satyricon, which featured a character named Trimalchio, who hosted ridiculously opulent feasts with exotic foods simply to impress his guests. These displays weren't just about taste. They were about showing wealth, power, and connections to far-flung parts of the empire where such exotic birds could be found. Number 6. Black soup of Sparta. Could a soup be so disgusting that it became famous throughout the ancient world? The Spartans' black soup surely fits that description. This infamous meal consisted primarily of boiled pig's blood, salt, and vinegar, with a little bit of pork meat thrown in. It was so unappetizing to outsiders that one visitor from Sybaris reportedly said, "Now I know why Spartans aren't afraid to die in battle," implying that death was preferable to eating such food regularly. Unlike the luxurious Roman foods mentioned earlier, Sparta's black soup, melazomos, wasn't about showing off wealth. It was about toughness and military discipline. Young Spartan boys in the agoge, military training, were fed this soup as part of their austere lifestyle, designed to harden them into fearless warriors. The preparation was straightforward, but required skill. The blood had to be collected and mixed with the broth at just the right temperature to prevent curdling. Chefs would add vinegar to help keep the blood from solidifying too quickly. The result was a thick, dark soup that served as a primary protein source for Spartan soldiers. What's fascinating is that while other Greek city-states developed elaborate cuisines with imported spices and cooking techniques, the Spartans intentionally maintained this basic, unappetizing diet as a point of national pride. It represented their values of simplicity, discipline, and rejection of luxury. Archaeological evidence from ancient Sparta shows much simpler cooking equipment than found in other Greek cities, supporting historical accounts of their austere eating habits. Number 5. Silphium, the plant. Seasoning so delicious, it was eaten to extinction. Have you ever loved a food so much you'd pay its weight in silver? Ancient Romans did exactly that for silphium, a plant so delicious it was literally eaten to extinction. This herb, which grew only in a small area near Cyrene, modern-day Libya, became the most sought-after seasoning in the ancient world. Silphium was used in practically every dish imaginable in ancient Roman cooking. It was added to meats, vegetables, and even desserts. The plant's resin was particularly prized, often stored in containers made of silver to preserve its unique flavor. Its popularity wasn't just culinary. Silphium was also used medicinally and as a contraceptive, making it even more valuable. What did it taste like? Historical accounts describe it as having a flavor profile somewhere between garlic, fennel, and asafoetida, another strong-smelling resin still used in Indian cooking. Roman cookbooks from the time contained countless recipes calling for silphium, usually as the primary flavoring agent. The plant proved impossible to cultivate anywhere outside its native habitat near Cyrene, and as demand grew, wild populations were harvested with increasing intensity. By the time of Emperor Nero, 1st century, silphium had become so rare that when the last known stock was discovered, it was sent to the emperor himself as a curiosity. The plant that had once been so common that its image appeared on Cyrene's coins was gone forever, making it perhaps the first documented case of a species being eaten to extinction. Number 4. Morim, the ancient Roman garlic cheese, spread that could kill your social life. Would you eat something with so much garlic it could keep friends away for days? Ancient Romans had a spread called moretum that contained so much garlic it would make modern garlic bread seem bland by comparison. This peasant food was essentially the ancient version of cheese spread, but with an intensity that would shock modern palates. According to a poem called Moretum, attributed to Virgil, a typical recipe included a whole head of garlic, not just a few cloves, herbs like coriander and rue salt, olive oil, and a hard cheese similar to today's pecorino, all pounded together in a mortar until smooth. The resulting paste was eaten spread on bread as a simple meal for farmers and laborers. The poem describes a farmer named Simulus making this pungent spread, noting how the garlic creates such a strong odor that it brings tears to his eyes and makes him curse as he prepares it. After eating it, the poor farmer would go to work in his fields, his breath so powerful that it kept away snakes and other pests. Unlike the extravagant foods of the wealthy Romans, Moretum was practical, nutritious fuel for those who performed physical labor. The high garlic content not only provided flavor, but also offered enzymatic benefits, potentially helping preserve the cheese longer in the days before refrigeration. While the wealthy might have turned up their noses at such a humble and intensely flavored food, archaeological evidence from common households shows that garlic was a staple ingredient across social classes. Number 3. Sheep's head and stomach. From Viking feasts to modern delicacies, could you stare at your dinner while it stares back at you? For ancient Vikings, this was perfectly normal during feasts where sheep's heads were a central dish. The preparation was straightforward but effective. The head would be singed to remove the wool, then split in half before being boiled until tender. Nothing was wasted in Viking cuisine. The eyes, tongue, and even the brain were all considered edible parts, with the cheap meat particularly prized for its tenderness. These heads weren't just eaten for survival. They were featured prominently at important gatherings and ceremonies. Archaeological finds from Viking settlements have revealed sheep skull fragments with cut marks that indicate careful butchering for food preparation. If sheep's head wasn't adventurous enough, Vikings and other northern peoples also enjoyed haggis-like dishes made from sheep's stomach, stuffed with a mixture of offal, heart, liver, lungs, oatmeal, fat, and herbs. This resourceful approach to cooking used parts that might otherwise be discarded, creating hearty, protein-rich meals that could sustain warriors and farmers through the harsh northern winters. What's fascinating is that these foods haven't disappeared with time. Modern Icelandic cuisine still features vid, sheep's head, continuing a tradition that stretches back over 1,000 years to their Viking ancestors. In Norway, smalahove remains a traditional dish, particularly around Christmas time. The preparation methods have changed little over the centuries, a remarkable continuity in culinary tradition that few other foods can claim. Number 2, cockroaches, locusts, and beetles. The ancient protein source making a comeback. Did you know that ancient Egyptians and Israelites regularly snacked on locusts? While the thought might make many modern diners squirm, insects were a common and important source of protein across many ancient civilizations. In fact, the Bible specifically mentions locusts as one of the few insects that were kosher and permitted for consumption. Ancient Egyptians depicted locusts being harvested and prepared in tomb paintings, suggesting they were a normal part of the diet. The methods of preparation varied. Sometimes they were roasted, other times boiled, and occasionally ground into flour that could be mixed with honey or used in bread. During locust plagues, which could devastate crops, the ability to turn the pests into food was a practical way of making the best of a difficult situation. In ancient China, silkworm pupae, cicadas, and various beetles were regularly consumed, with archaeological evidence showing specialized tools for insect preparation dating back thousands of years. Chinese medical texts from as early as 200 BC discuss the health benefits of various insects, prescribing them for everything from inflammation to constipation. Indigenous cultures in Australia have been eating witchetty grubs and honey ants for tens of thousands of years. The larvae, which can grow as large as a person's finger, were often eaten raw or lightly cooked over coals. They were so valued that knowledge of prime harvesting locations was carefully passed down through generations. What's particularly interesting is that after centuries of being dismissed as primitive food by Western cultures, insects are now being reconsidered as sustainable protein sources. The ancient practice of entomophagy, eating insects, is gaining new attention as modern food scientists look for environmentally friendly protein alternatives for our growing global population. Number 1. Gladiator blood, the ancient energy drink. Would you drink human blood to cure your epilepsy? Ancient Romans did. Could you imagine anything more bizarre than spectators at the Colosseum rushing to drink the fresh blood of fallen gladiators? This macabre practice was surprisingly common in ancient Rome, where gladiator blood was considered a powerful medicine. Roman physician Pliny the Elder wrote about epileptics drinking the blood of gladiators as though from living cups, immediately after the fighters were killed in the arena. The belief was that gladiator blood contained vitality, strength, and courage that could be transferred to the drinker. The fresher the blood, the more potent its supposed healing properties, which led to some truly gruesome scenes as people would dash onto the arena sands to collect the still warm blood. It wasn't just epilepsy that gladiator blood was thought to cure. Various Roman medical texts recommend it for everything from impotence to infertility. The blood was sometimes mixed with wine to make it more palatable, or turned into tablets by mixing it with flour and drying it for later use. Wealthy Romans, who couldn't stomach drinking blood directly, might purchase these tablets as a more refined alternative. This practice reflected not only ancient medical theories about transferring life force, but also the unique status of gladiators in Roman society. They were simultaneously considered the lowest members of society. Many were slaves or criminals and celebrated as embodiments of martial prowess and courage. Their blood was thought to carry these qualities, making it valuable to those seeking strength or healing. While some historians have questioned how widespread blood drinking actually was, multiple Roman writers mention the practice without particular shock or disgust, suggesting it was an accepted, if somewhat extreme, medical treatment. The gladiatorial games themselves were already drenched in blood and violence, so perhaps drinking the blood of fallen fighters was just one more aspect of Rome's complex relationship with violence and spectacle. Have you ever wondered what future generations will think about our current food habits? Will they find our fast food as bizarre as we find some of these ancient delicacies?